Welcome, everyone, to another amazing episode of the Cup of Nurses podcast. And today we have episode 55 of the Cup of News. I just want to thank everybody right off the bat for your time. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your support. And if you don't know, we are on a bunch of platforms. Recently, we just hit 1,000 subs on YouTube. Thank
Hell
you for
yeah.
everybody. Yep, it's a good milestone for us. Thank everybody for your subscriptions and your comments and your likes on YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're all around. And make sure to check out our website, couplenurses.com. We have lots of cool content there. And we're also going to have more things rolling in the future, like a potential shop of some sort, maybe, possibly coming soon. And don't forget to check out frontlinewarriors.com as well, right?
Thank you for that beautiful intro. On today's episode, we're going to talk about new breakthroughs in CRISPR technology and also the wonderful drug Ivermectin, which has been having a lot of discussions about whether it's actually able to reduce the virology load of COVID, right?
Yeah, so I like these couple news episodes, especially when we get into these technology things, because technology is just all around us, and it's always changing. If you look back, I don't know if I was reading something or I just heard it somewhere, but it made me think. So there is I think they said 65 or 67 year difference between the creation of airplanes and us going to the moon.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? About 65 years it took us to go from planes to the moon.
And now maybe we'll have 65 years or maybe less to go from treating via antibiotics versus maybe nanotechnology in the future. Like, who knows where this is going?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's all so groundbreaking, and just hearing it progress. And you hear about these giant breakthroughs, and it's even more interesting to me like to see it progress. The breakthroughs are amazing, and new technology is awesome, but usually when these breakthroughs happen, it's not something that could be implicitly done to humans.
Yeah.
Usually it takes a few years for it to pass these safety trials and then finally reach the human stage. And that's really what interests me, and that's kind of cool. That's kind of where CRISPR is almost going towards nowadays.
Exactly. And this trial that we're going to talk about, it's actually phase 1. So CRISPR was actually successfully injected into the bloodstream to treat a genetic disease for the first time. And it's so cool because this is actually the merge between the mRNA technology that we see in COVID, and it also takes CRISPR and injects it to that site to, in this case, stop like the misfoldings of proteins.
Yeah, so for CRISPR-Cas9, it was a giant breakthrough that was able to allow us to use a specific protein and basically almost turn genes on and off, cut the RNA, add different nucleotides. So it allows us to do a lot of these cool things. And now the study that Matt looked into and how this is progressing, it's going more, you could say, mainstream, and they're trying to tackle these disorders that are kind of on the outside perspective, right? Because when you bring these new technologies into the human genome and into humans for studies, you have to first target the diseases that are the hardest to treat.
The rare genetic disorders.
Right.
Yes.
So right now it's not appropriate time for us to use CRISPR to fight diabetes, because we have a pretty decent control of diabetes, and plus there's already a lot of things for treatment. So it's better for them and more efficient for them to tackle these diseases on the outskirts that not a lot of people have, just to test the fundamentals and actually solve that problem and then move on to bigger things.
Especially if you later on in the episode talk about how expensive it is to fight this specific disease and this genetic disorder. CRISPR maybe will cut the price in half potentially.
That'd be amazing.
And it's crazy because just last month, researchers learned how to fix cholesterol just in monkeys in May. And now we're injecting this into the bloodstream. So normally CRISPR works in vitro. They basically inject medications into like the genome, and it does modifications. For example, they were able to inject CRISPR into like the fetal diseases of patients with sickle cell disease, and we're able to reverse that in rats. Mm-hmm. So now what we're doing is the University of London injected 6 people with this new drug, and it was actually able to treat 4 out of the 6 people. Not completely, but this is just the beginning stages of creating a technology that's actually able to maybe potentially permanently reverse a genetic disorder.
Mm-hmm. So is this regarding, you said reversing the disease or the issue, or is it turning it off for you to not get it?
So yeah, I'm going to go into the details. So When it comes to this genetic disorder, and I'm only going to pronounce it once because it's damn difficult. Then we're going to do an acronym. So it's transthyretin amyloidosis, TRR. So what this is basically amyloidosis is a misfolding in the protein disorder, okay? So normally your liver's producing this, and it creates that specific protein. What happens in this disease process, it binds together, and it changes the protein of the shape of the protein, which creates a misfolding. And what that does, it starts working in this peripheral nervous system, causes a lot of neuropathy. For example, it causes carpal tunnel in patients. It causes spinal stenosis because it affects the spinal cord. And eventually, it could even affect the heart where you're able to get AFib from this. So this is a very nasty genetic disease that the lifespan sometimes is only 20 to 60 years.
Damn. And this is something that I probably could look into myself, but does this disease happen early on in life or random?
It can be, yes. You're usually born with it. There's two types. One, of course, is genetic, and then some patients, which they don't know how, eventually start having this problem when they're older, and they have that misfolding.
Okay.
So it depends when. And what happened here in this study, it's interesting because they needed a merger of technology. So the person that actually created CRISPR, her company that she started actually merged with Regeneron. I'm not sure what medications they made. I know there's a few. They're the ones that have the mRNA technology. So the mRNA technology is actually able to deliver the gene editing device into the liver. So what happens is mRNA is like almost a carrier, right? Because usually CRISPR is injected directly into something in vitro. Here, they needed to actually inject it into the bloodstream, and it gets carried to the liver to make this gene mutation editing. So it's fascinating because it's a merge of two huge technologies that we just been hearing about during COVID and CRISPR for the past few episodes in the past few years.
Right. Yeah, damn, that's amazing. So basically, what they're doing is they're using the CRISPR-Cas9, the whole process, because all that's responsible for CRISPR-Cas9 is basically it's basically an enzyme that moves from one area to another, and then is able to change genetics, right? So they use that as a transportation device,
Right.
and they transport that technology that Regeneron made.
Yeah.
They transport that into the nucleus or whatever wherever that needs to go, right? And the machine the mechanism actually does it, right?
Yeah. So there's like two injected messengers in this. There's two RNAs. One of them is to identify the mutation, and the other one is the Cas9 to cut it.
Okay.
So the messenger is delivering both. Once it's
Okay.
delivered, it finds the gene, it kicks it, and then repairs this at the site, and then the body starts making normal production of that misfolding protein.
Yeah. Okay.
So with the results, after 28 days, 3 men given the higher dose of the 2 doses had a treatment that had an 80 to 96% drop in the TRR level, the protein levels, versus a medication that's given now. It's averaged around 81%.
That's pretty good. Can't complain. And imagine over time they get more accurate, possibly, more efficient.
Yeah, and this drug, it's called Onpattro. Jeez, man, all these medications F me up. But anyways, the cost of this medication is around $13,000 per vial. If you look at the treatment for a whole year, it's around $450,000 to $677,000, depending on the patient's weight in kilogram. So if CRISPR-Cas9 with this merge is able to reduce that price, because ultimately that's going to help our GDP. We're spending 17% in healthcare. So that'd be cool if, we're able to remove that process. And the next step would be to make this permanent. So that's the only kicker here, guys. Everything sounded so exciting when I was reading this study. I was so amped up about this. And then I realized that this mRNA is going to have to be injected every so often, they don't know how often, in order to keep turning off that gene that's creating that bad misfolding.
Yeah, and they're using the mRNA technology as well in the vaccines, and that might be why those are temporary as well.
Right. Even in the pharmaceuticals, man, there's just a huge jump for this technology now. So we're going to see what it can do. And the lady, Jennifer Duando, that actually created CRISPR and the development of the Nobel Peace Prize, she actually said this is a critical first step in the ability to inactivate, repair, and replace any gene that causes disease in the body.
Yeah, that's the power of CRISPR.
So it's scary because the human body has been around for thousands of years, and our DNA has been working just fine because we're still alive as a species. So what's going to happen to the future generations that are going to have some gene modifications now.
Yeah, it's gonna be super interesting, especially with those HIV proof babies in China
Right.
they basically had two twins that were born, and they used CRISPR-Cas9 to turn off the genes that are responsible for HIV. So they're supposed to be HIV completely HIV resistant. And imagine if we were able to do that to something like called like diabetes or certain other illnesses. But then the thing is, let's say for example, we decided to turn off the gene for diabetes, right? Does that mean your body's going to always produce insulin? What if you still eat shitty, and because instead of you getting diabetes, you get something worse than diabetes? You know what I'm saying?
Because you keep turning off that gene.
Because just because you turn it off his birth doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to solve that problem. Because if the person keeps eating unhealthily, it's still going to impact their body in some way, right?
So this is a very good theory you just bring up. So the way medications cause other adverse effects and problems in the body, just like, for example, taking amiodarone could cause the fibrosis in the lungs, right, and all that. Gene editing can cause other issues that we don't know that could potentially happen.
Yeah, it's just like how anything in medicine works. It takes a lot of time for it to get established as safe, because we really don't know what's going to happen to us over 50, 100 years, because we have to have that medication or that treatment for that amount of time.
Right. Not only that, but now think about this. You know how our body always likes to go back to homeostasis and it wants to remain at that point? What if now we start having genetically modified organs? What if there's going to be this push for homeostasis, meaning our body's going to be fighting these things off because they're going to recognize it's foreign?
Yeah, it'll be insane. Or even think about it. You know how we overprescribe antibiotics and there's like these superbugs?
Right.
What if we over edit our genes and then our genes develop a resistance to CRISPR-Cas9 or these tools that we use, and then we're screwed on all levels? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, wow.
What if we keep doing it over time, and then it starts to become less effective because we overuse antibiotics. We were messing with it around too much and not staying in the playing field. We kept going over, where our body says, "Oh, okay, that's enough," because we're being changed. Let's figure out how to live a cellular life without needing to use these enzymes that CRISPR-Cas9 does. It'd be insane.
Very good point. And that's the scary that our ethics never gets forward to the technology that's advancing. So we're always like a couple years behind on an ethical level.
That's because it's kind of difficult to do that with ethics, because when you have a new science coming along, you don't really have those ethical dilemmas yet. You don't. And the ones we ask those questions or have those ideas because you don't think that technology is capable of doing something like that. And usually questions get asked after the fact.
Or there's some repercussions.
Right. And there's always that corporate influence where the more questions we ask, the more negative things we might bring about it. So let's not ask these questions. And let's not foreshadow too much into the negative future. Let's just push as positive. And then if roadblocks come, we'll deal with it.
Right. Or the problem that we might run into is just like the sugar industry, right? Where we knew that sugar was bad, but we kept kind of lobbying money into protecting that and just looking at eggs and cholesterol and saturated fat as a problem.
Yeah.
So that could happen too. So just, of course, be careful. If someone approaches you and you want to get a designer baby or something in your future, just
hold off.
Just hold off, see what's going on, just like holding off with
Talk to your loved one.
mRNA technology, exactly.
Yeah, because someone said, "Hey, you want a designer baby?" And
sounds cool, man.
Sounds amazing, but like I don't think they have the technology for it right now. So if it sounds too good to be true, probably is.
Yeah, you're better off just trying to find a partner that's looking like you want to reproduce with,
Yeah, I guess.
Hey man, you got good genes. Okay, we might make a good baby right there.
That's so funny.
And that's your own designer baby by picking your mate.
That's funny, dude. All right, next up for you guys, we have ivermectin. So ivermectin has been on the news the last couple of weeks regarding its effectiveness against COVID-19. The main issue with this, or the main reason why it's brought up, a lot of people are saying, what's the point of ivermectin if we already have a vaccine? The point that a lot of people bring up, and a point I'm going to bring up as well, is the U.S. government's or the worldwide government's lack of approval of these kind of medications that were shown to be useful. But instead of letting these things be used, they pursued more new meds and vaccines and things like that to bring in money.
Right.
Where they didn't really, they were more focused on, let's produce something that works compared to let's see what we have to see what works.
We never looked at the arsenal of every other thing that we had.
We
Even
looked at it a little
Decathlon,
bit.
right? It took some time.
We looked at it a little bit, but not as closely and as efficiently as we can. I feel like we looked at it a little bit, and then someone came up with the idea of, instead of looking, let's create something, and then everybody hopped on that creation bandwagon and kind of ditched the, hey, let's see what we have. And now some studies are coming out are showing that ivermectin has some positive effects against COVID-19 prophylactically and even in hospital use. Even though the FDA doesn't approve ivermectin as treatment for COVID-19, I'm pretty sure the World Health Organization does. But you can't always look at the FDA as always trying to give you 100% positive and completely true information. They do make mistakes. It happens. Like Matt said with the whole sugar thing, people have their own intentions. And, if companies are making money and they're seeing positive results, they're not going to go back and change it. So a few things I looked into regarding ivermectin is, first of all, I was interested in actually how this medication interferes with COVID-19, right? Because we have to first figure out what mechanism of action does this medication have that was able to turn off these COVID-19 receptors or turn off this inflammation. And when I looked into it, it actually inhibits the host important alpha/beta-1 nuclear transport proteins, which are the key players in intracellular transport process that viruses hijack. So when your virus hijacks your cells, it hijacks the via cell membrane, it latches onto it, right? And ivermectin is able to interfere with that process. So these viruses aren't able to latch on the cell membrane and change up.
So it prevents
your
that
immune
spike
process.
protein from even being produced to
Correct.
begin with.
So that's the main reason on how it works, because ivermectin is not an antiviral, it's an antiparasitic. So technically it's not supposed to treat viruses, but the theory is ivermectin inhibits and prevents and messes around with a lot of different mechanisms of action between our cells that parasites use, but also viruses use. So even though it's not a direct antiviral, it still messes with some of the mechanisms that might inhibit the viruses from actually causing like this large immune response.
That's why we were using hydroxychloroquine at one point, because it was an anti-malaria drug.
Yeah.
And fun fact, ivermectin was actually used between
Ivermectin.
I'm sorry, it was used between 1995 to 2010 to help treat river blindness and help prevent it.
Yeah, as actually was. So when ivermectin first came to the public, there was one charity that donated millions and millions of dollars to treat river blindness in, I think it was Africa or somewhere like that. And they funded this by themselves. So shout out to those people. I'm not sure what their names are. I wish I wrote them down. I would have told them. But they predicted that them donating this money and this medication prevented 7 million years of disability, because river blindness is that bad where it affects tons of people and it affects their genetics.
So they saved $257 million.
But it prevented 7 million years of disability. What they're estimating is that by
collective cost.
Yes, no. So collective cost was 257 million, but I'm saying years of disability. So by this medication saved millions of years of illness. What they're saying, not only millions of dollars, but years of illness. That's how river blindness affects generations to that point. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how much truth that is into it. It seems like a lot, but whatever it did, it was very promising. Like, it's crazy.
And that's exactly what happened with polio too, when we figured out that vaccine and we were able to cure it because it was causing so much disability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I actually wonder about that. My dentist brought up a good point. Jeez, I'd rather not say it on the air.
For sure.
We'll talk about it later, man. I'm gonna stir the pot hardcore.
Yeah. And initially, I went to ivermectin. I got interested in it because I heard it on the Brett Weinstein podcast. I think it's Iron Horse or Dark Horse podcast.
Yeah.
If you guys are interested. And then of course I did some digging. I looked at the NIHS, I looked at Google Scholar, and found some pretty interesting details and some interesting studies. A lot of them are meta-analyses, just because the best way to gather large amounts of research quickly is through meta-analysis. So not actually doing the trial itself, but actually gathering all trials that were done, if you're trying to do it as efficiently as quickly as possible, because experiment with like a placebo and a trial group is going to take lots of time, right? So the next best thing is going to be to see everything, because we've already seen the benefits of ivermectin in other medications, and we already know the mechanism of action. So we just look at the studies to actually see if it has any kind of benefit. Because once you figure out the mechanism of action and it doesn't directly inhibit parasites, it also inhibits the mechanism of action of viruses, then you already have one of the keys to the problem.
Right. Then the only thing that's the issue here is that why ivermectin wasn't pushed so hard. It's actually $7 a pill, and there's many generics. It's just too cheap. Too cheap for what, you may ask? For profit. Because at the end of the day, healthcare is a business, and everybody knows that. And if there's no money to be made, it's not going to get any publicity, no. Yeah. Especially if you just really quick, you dive into like who all these companies possess. You know, you look into your Vanguard and your BlackRock, which, you know, has all your 401ks. That's where most company shares are being owned by. That's where most influence is, you know, done.
Of course, yeah. Everyone's going to take everyone's going to always promote the route that is going to guarantee them the most money. They also have your best interest in mind, but if I have two things, one of them I give you for, one of them I can charge you for $1, other one I can charge you for $1,000, but they work just as good. You know, there's people out there that are gonna choose the $1,000 because they want to get that money, even though they're still helping you, but they're also helping themselves.
Yeah, and that's what's wild. That's why money doesn't solve happiness, because it just creates greed sometimes.
Yeah, and one of the studies looked into, and these are all available on our show notes if you guys want to look at them. The links are there if you don't believe us and you just think we're just talking out of our ass, but they're all there. So one of the research studies that I looked into was, the title of it was Ivermectin, a U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved antiparasitic agent, was found to inhibit severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 replication in vitro. So this actually took a look at a trial which had 72 patients in it, and this is actually in Bangladesh, and it took 3 groups. One group got oral ivermectin just by itself. Other one got the ivermectin plus doxycycline, and the third one got nothing. It was a placebo. And the results showed that the viral clearance was 3 days quicker in the ivermectin group versus the placebo versus the ivermectin and the doxycycline group. Yeah. So if you give ivermectin alone, it's looking like your viral clearance is going to be better 3 days sooner than the other groups.
What's also fascinating about this is when you double up the drug, ivermectin with doxycycline, it actually increases your dose days to like 11.5, which is just as much with the viral clearance as if you were just doing a placebo and just like trying to fight off a bad flu.
Yeah, so maybe some kind of medication interaction going on, or maybe one medication is turning on something and other one's turning it off. So this is actually pretty promising because it actually showed you that alone ivermectin is beneficial, right? Because a lot of times in a hospital we see, you know, doxy given fairly commonly, but when you look at studies, so let's say if there was like a group where it was just ivermectin and doxy versus placebo, and then the doxy and ivermectin showed to be positive or negative, that would have skewed the result. That's why it's always good to always change one variable. Exactly. That's why they'll be changed just the medication. Another interesting study I looked at was titled Review of the Emerging Evidence Demonstrating the Efficacy of Ivermectin in the Prophylaxis and Treatment of COVID-19 Patients. So this actually was another meta-analysis. I believe looked at like 18 studies, and the results were pretty staggering. It basically said that ivermectin significantly reduced hospital time and significantly reduced viral clearance for patients that have COVID-19 with ivermectin use. And India was giant on ivermectin use because it was so cheap. Same with Mexico. Mexico used ivermectin, and then they went from, I'm not sure how their staging is, but they introduced ivermectin to the population where they distributed it in their country, and they were able to drop their shut down laws and regulations. Yeah, they were able to be more free.
The doctor that was on Joe Rogan had a great argument with ivermectin and all the benefits. You know, that one doctor, forgot his name.
I'm not sure what his name is, but yeah.
So it seems very promising with everything that's, you know, we're talking about. And even this one, this is a meta-analysis based on 18 randomized control, you know, studies. I wonder if we're going to use this drug maybe in the future. For example, right now on TV, we're hearing about like, you know, COVID Delta, and then everybody's freaking out. For example, I talked to somebody at the gym, and our governor was already saying something, and he was already wearing a mask to be cautious about that. So you already know that potentially I think there's going to be, I don't want to say it, but hopefully we don't go back into like some shutdown or stuff like that. It'd be super annoying.
That would suck. To be honest, I don't think they're going to push ivermectin as much, is because they already have the the vaccine out.
Oh, yeah, we're
And-
good.
Yeah, and the vaccine's, I guess, doing a job for whatever, whatever we hear on the news, it's lowering cases and stuff and so forth. But there are also adverse effects to it. But I don't think they're going to go back into ivermectin unless we go into another like giant shutdown, right? Because there's no need for them to really do it because they're pushing all these vaccines. And
We already
plus
have
they
the
get money in.
prophylaxis that we
Yeah,
really need.
yeah. But our main issue, the reason why I was a little upset about this is like they had access to this and just nobody pursued it. They had this information that ivermectin was shown efficacy against COVID-19, but they still didn't do it. They didn't push that as a beneficial.
Yeah.
They had this research. They had it before us. They had it almost in the beginning because when they were trying everything out to see what we could use, what we have, they had this stuff. There's nobody did it because hey, instead of doing this, wasting our time, let's manufacture something new. That's how it went.
And it's cool because we started making Cup of News technically because of COVID, right? This is where it started. We started making these episodes and we're going heavy into it. And if you look back at those episodes, a lot of what we said or predicted or what might have been or why things happen, we were pretty dead on, man. And now we're looking back at things and, everybody was shaming this drug, that drug, but actually wasn't that bad to use. We could have, but there was just always more profit motives. You kind of see right through it, man. And it's very sad what's happening because like last year was like this huge slap in the face for me, and it's like, wow, I love science and I believe it in so much because we do this for a living, and it bothers me how political it got and it never became about the science, man. I can't look at the news the same way like this and just I have to take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, my views and opinions about healthcare and science have definitely changed. I've grown over, especially looking at it 5 years down the line. I went into nursing as one of the, even though healthcare is a big business, I saw healthcare and medicine as one of the smaller big businesses. And over the years, I noticed that it's just as big as, corporate
anything
Wall
else.
Street, Yeah, it's just as big. And same with science. Science, you always thought, hey, it's science, right? We always do science with good faith and good measure. We always try to see what works, see what doesn't on a scientific basis. We don't get religion involved. We don't get opinions involved. We just trial and error.
Yeah.
But now it's like, hey, that's being corporatized too, because a lot of things in science need funding. And the only science you could do is funded science, because it's very hard to do non-funded science because you're paying out of pocket, right? So you can't always, as a scientist, pursue everything you want to because the funding's not there. And sometimes the funding is in the wrong places. And, if you don't be careful as a scientist, as a researcher, you're going to get sucked into it.
Yeah, you make a very good point. I'm actually very proud of us as a podcast because we stood through trials and tribulations of getting censored and taken off like specific episodes when we talked about this stuff, and bad publicity from like social media, people calling us like, how are you nurses, and not believing in science. But really the real science was what we were saying and showing you guys the facts, and people just looked like, it was crazy. So I'm really proud that we have like technically recorded in history that we're accurate, and it's great to still be here and talk about this and look into different medications, because ivermectin is actually something that someone brought up to me to podcast back like in March or April. And then like we got this bad hit with like this whole vaccine thing, and I just prefer not to even bring up this topic. I was just like, man, let's just lay low and not worry about this. So I'm glad that, hey, we could get to discuss this now that everything is, out of the water, and we're just kind of like, everybody's chill. Even about the whole thing with China, correct? Our episode got deleted when we mentioned that it could be potentially like some kind of man-made virus, or has some kind of variations in the mutations, right? That could potentially lead to that. And same thing, man.
That was like when they did the whole like, hey, where'd it come from? If someone tells you, hey, this virus started in this town that so happens to have a wet market and a level 4 clearance lab to experiment on viruses, common sense would tell you, hey, maybe we should probably take a look at the lab first, especially if the virus came from somewhere around the lab. And everybody was like, no, because you're being racist, or it's not right. Like, common sense is going to tell you, right? If like, dude, I don't even want to give any more. Like,
it's like your intuition, It's your intuition.
It's not even intuition. It's not even intuition.
Common sense.
When you're looking for your keys, what are you gonna check? Probably your pockets first, right? You're not gonna check the fridge first, right? Common sense.
Yes.
right? You're not gonna be like, hey, I'm not stupid. I'm not gonna check my pockets because it's for sure not in my pockets. And you check the fridge, it's not in the fridge. And you check your pocket, turns out it's in your pockets. That's literally what we did. Is we basically, and I don't know how, I don't even know how it happened. And it was in the midst of like this whole racial thing going on with protests and everything.
It was
and,
perfect.
And it was perfect. And,
was
and that's why.
perfect.
And that's why. And then the lab or the owners of the lab or whoever's idea was it, they used us. They played us. Because by the time someone started talking about it, it was already, months and months in.
Even those Fauci emails, man, it
Yeah.
tells you everything right there. And my dentist today, okay, I'll say this one though. The dentist told me today that supposedly like those emails were dating back to like the early 2000s. They wanted to put a patent on the original COVID like one that came out.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, man. I mean, if you think about it, they're just big people in power that, yes, they're in charge of like the health public department and CDC, but they're trying to make some cash on the side too. You know what I'm saying? If you could say something and make something good and you could, have a little bit more money, that's the way they see it. And it's so sad what's happening, man.
Exactly. Thank you for your time so much. We love you all. Make sure you check us on YouTube and see you on the next episode.
Peace.